This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigns as anti-corruption protests continue to rock the Himalayan nation in defiance of a curfew following clashes that left at least 19 people dead. The South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun due to meet American counterpart Marco Rubio, with talks expected to focus on the 300 South Koreans detained in Georgia following a major immigration raid. And North Korea conducts a new engine test for long-range ballistic missiles, which state media says enhances the country's strategic nuclear capability. Japan's prime ministerial hopefuls prepare their leadership bids, with the ruling LDP choosing a full-scale vote of lawmakers and party members, the ballot set for early next month. And Chinese officials call the development of artificial intelligence a must for the country as Beijing sets out the next 5-year blueprint. Thaksin Bulletin. One of Thailand's most influential political figures sent to jail. Thaksin sentenced to a year in prison after the country's top court ruled his previous hospital detention as unlawful. Plus, we find out one woman's secret to becoming a minimalist international nomad. How doable is it? We are starting with a developing story grabbing attention in East Asia and across the broader region. The Nepali Prime Minister has stepped down as protests rage in the country. KP Sharma Oli's resignation came a day after a deadly crackdown on demonstrations that left 19 people dead and dozens more injured. For now, his decision and the government's move to lift a social media ban do not seem to be doing much to ease public outrage over state corruption. Protesters are defying a curfew imposed yesterday when demonstrations turned violent. Crowds had attempted to break into the parliament building. Now, they've also begun torching the homes of some politicians and commercial establishments. The international airport in the capital, Kathmandu, has closed with immediate effect. Mr. Oli says that he is stepping down effective today to take further steps towards a political solution and resolution of the problems. But as correspondent Pooja Pant tells us, public outrage has been growing for some time now.
The protest that came out of the young people that got together was a protest against the rampant corruption that is prevalent in Nepal and that the young people face. And a lot of the protest was also against what the young generation terms as nepo babies. So nepotism that exists within the ruling class of Nepal that allows their own to profit from the taxpayers' money, whereas the country and the citizens are, leaving the country in hordes in hope for a better life by going to places like the Middle East and parts of Asia for working in extremely unskilled labor and extreme exploitative states. So this is not just about the social media ban. Of course, there was anger about the media policy and the kind of quelling of dissident voices and not allowing voices to come out, one of which was through the social media ban. But this is the protest was a larger protest against the corrupt Nepali state. So I don't know if the lifting of the social media ban will have much effect, especially with 19 young people dying.
Shifting our attention back to East Asia, Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has confirmed it will elect a new leader on October 4th. Now, the vote comes after Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba stepped down, taking responsibility for stinging electoral defeats. The party's election chief says an official notice will be issued on September 22nd. A 12-day campaign follows, with ballots cast by both lawmakers and rank-and-file members nationwide. Counting will be held on October 4th. A former LDP Secretary General and Foreign Affairs Minister Toshimitsu Motegi has declared his run. Reports say others, including former Economic Security Ministers Sanae Takaichi and Takayuki Kabayashi, Agriculture Minister Shinjiro Koizumi, and Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi, are weighing their bids. Candidates need the backing of 20 lawmakers to qualify. But with the LDP no longer controlling parliament, the winner is not guaranteed a premiership. Well, this contest was originally set for 2027, but Mr. Ishiba's resignation forced an early race after pressure from within the party. Under his rule, the LDP lost its majority in both houses of parliament. And for more on this, CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida joins us live now from Tokyo. So, Michio, I believe the LDP, they just held a presser this afternoon where they announced a decision for a full-spec election, basically involving all LDP members and the election schedule. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, well, the LDP, as you mentioned, approved the full-spec election that's involving all 1 million LDP members nationwide. The election committee said that it's laying out the details for approval by the General Council on Wednesday. Now, the basic dates proposed are 22nd of September, the day for registration of contestants, and 4th of October as election day. And campaign period will be 12 days, and at least 12 days are required under LDP law. Rank and file members must post their ballots to reach LDP headquarters the day before Election Day. More details have to be drawn out for approval by the party's General Council, then conveyed to parliamentarians and LDP rank and file members so they know the rules and regulations. Separately, on the 12th of September, the election committee will hold a meeting to decide on the form of campaigning. Some possibilities will be on TV networks, on internet platforms, in public areas. Now, the main reason this full-scale format has been taken, according to Ichiro Aizawa, who's the chairman of the election committee, is to show the LDP is serious about a complete overhaul of the party and that it's taking a step towards revamping itself after losing 3 key elections: the general election, Tokyo Assembly election, and Upper House election.
So, Michio, this election format, which is quite different from previous ones, how is it being received by the public?
Well, actually, there's criticism. The period leading up to the election is too long. Campaign period is about 2 weeks away from now. And election date is around 3 weeks away. And political watchers complain policy making to deal with rising prices will stall. Opposition parties are complaining LDP has not kept its promise about finding an alternative to lifting tax on gasoline and wants diet to be convened this month. Also, it's less than a year since the LDP presidential election, which took place with campaign period even longer, 15 days period. And another point analysts are mentioning is the full-spec election can be favorable to certain candidates and unfavorable to others. For instance, one of the top favorites, according to media polls, to succeed Mr. Ishiba is Shinjiro Koizumi, who was appointed agriculture minister in May, replacing a minister who was protective of the rice growers. Mr. Koizumi called for a quick release of reserved rice to bring down the prices of rice, which doubled since last year. He did not go through farm unions' distribution route, but and we heard some rice farmers expressing their anger. Farmer unions are support group of the LDP. Also controversial, he called for rice production to be expanded, but this cannot be done overnight. So Mr. Koizumi, if he is running in the race, might need to show a stronger appeal to the rank and file members and not just appeal to consumers or the general public with no voting rights.
Many thanks for that report, CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida live from Tokyo. South Korea's president says that he feels a heavy sense of responsibility for citizens detained in the U.S. after a raid on a Hyundai plant in the state of Georgia. More than 300 South Korean workers were arrested in the Trump administration's biggest immigration sweep yet. Lee Myung said that he hoped unfair infringements on South Korean people and businesses will never happen again. He also said that the detained workers will return home soon. A Korean air spokesperson said a chartered plane will be sent to Atlanta as early as tomorrow to bring the workers back. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is in Washington to seek assurances that the nationals returned home will be allowed to re-enter the U.S. The plan being finalized is for the detained workers to leave voluntarily rather than face deportation. Well, at least 3 Japanese and 9 Chinese nationals are among the 475 people detained in last week's raid. Media reports say Japanese authorities visited their detained citizens over the weekend.
No one is illegal! No one is illegal!
Meanwhile, protesters gathered at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, rallying against what they call a violation of human rights. An opinion poll shows nearly 6 in 10 South Koreans felt disappointed by American authorities' actions in the raid. Local businesses complain about Washington's visa limits and how their requirements for skilled foreign workers have made it difficult to oversee their factories in the U.S. Tony Waterman files this report for CNA.
Foreign Minister Cho's visit is really twofold. He wants to ensure the repatriation of the roughly 300 detained South Korean nationals, and he wants to make sure that something like this never happens again. The South Korean workers are right now being held at a detention facility in Folkston, Georgia, and they are expected to be flown home on a chartered flight as soon as Wednesday on a voluntary basis, according to South Korean officials. The underlying issue here, though, are visas. U.S. officials have implied that many of those detained had overstepped their visa, coming into the U.S. on a permit that only allows for business meetings, but instead working at this construction site, which would require a different type of visa. According to the Financial Times, Korean industry groups admit that they have cut corners on U.S. visas, but they say that they have little choice. One senior South Korean official telling the FT that companies are being pressured into investing billions of dollars in the U.S., but that the U.S. is refusing to facilitate short-term working visas to get these projects done, and that this has happened under both Republican and Democrat administrations. U.S. officials say that companies should be hiring Americans, but South Korean firms say that it is their people that have the necessary skills to get the jobs done. Plus, there is a lot of intellectual property that they are likely to want to protect. Minister Cho is expected to bring this visa issue up with U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, during his visit. Now, in the meantime, South Korean conglomerates are trying to contain the fallout. The Korea Economic Daily says that Hyundai has banned all U.S. trips by its staff, while LG Energy has postponed the opening of its EV battery plant in Georgia. This, of course, all comes against the backdrop of President Trump's aggressive crackdown on immigration, a policy that the U.S. Supreme Court is backing him on. On Monday, the top court lifted restrictions on immigration raids in Los Angeles, once again allowing agents to detain people they suspect may be in the country illegally, something critics equate to racial profiling. For CNA, I'm Tony Waterman in Washington, D.C.
In other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has supervised a test of a new rocket engine designed for its intercontinental ballistic missiles. State media KCNA reported the leader saying that the engine will bring a strategic change to Pyongyang's nuclear forces. Images show Mr. Kim looking at the flame from the test, which rounds up the engine's development process. Reports say this model is more powerful than past ones. A part of the engine is said to be made of carbon fiber, and it's meant to be lightweight, strong, and heat-resistant. North Korea has tested a number of long-range missiles and their components in recent years as it looks to cement its position as a nuclear power. Well, this all comes as Pyongyang bolsters ties with traditional allies Russia and China. Chinese President Xi hosted leaders from the two countries at the recent Victory Day parade in Beijing in an apparent show of unity. Mr. Xi, meantime, in a congratulatory letter to Mr. Kim on North Korea's 77th founding anniversary, has called for the enhancing of strategic communications between the two countries. That breaks up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight. Last week's raid on a Hyundai site in the U.S. exposing Asian companies' challenges to get work visas. And Chinese EV maker BYD predicting a bloodbath to come in the industry in China amid hyper-competitive conditions. Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and Roland Lim is standing by with the very latest in the business world. So, Roland, I was hearing that Japanese firms are flooding the U.S. market with billions of investments this year. So what exactly is driving the surge?
Right. It's a bet on U.S. growth and a way to sidestep tariffs, so Tally. Nippon Steel's $15 billion takeover of U.S. Steel also included in Japan's outbound investment flows to the U.S. The Japanese companies poured nearly $180 billion into the U.S. for the first 7 months of this year, and that's 20% more than the same period a year ago. And this includes the acquisition of American firms to the tune of some $25.5 billion. Notably, the takeover of U.S. Steel by Nippon Steel in June, that's a deal worth nearly $15 billion. The numbers also show a trend that a higher proportion of Japanese outbound investment is funneled into the U.S., which increased to nearly half for the January to July period. That's the highest in almost a decade. Meanwhile, Japan's investments in other countries such as Mexico and China have dipped, down more than 20% and 6% respectively on year. Japan's investments into the U.S. appear to be ramping up after both countries finalized a trade deal, with Japan agreeing to invest more than $500 billion in return for a reduced 15% tariff on its imports. In August, toilet maker Toto spent more than $200 million to expand its factory in Georgia, and Hitachi said it'll invest $1 billion to expand its power grid manufacturing capabilities. Asian automakers are warning that a shortage of U.S. work visas is stalling production. The issue came under the spotlight after a raid at Hyundai's Georgia plant that revealed how difficult it is for skilled Asian workers to secure short-term permits. That's a problem industry insiders say has long been an open secret. For years, South Korean companies have said they struggle to obtain short-term work visas for specialists needed in their high-tech plants in the U.S. And that meant relying on a gray zone of looser interpretation of visa rules under previous American administrations. The issue became more prominent during the presidency of Joe Biden, with more companies drawn to the U.S. with generous subsidies and inducements during the Biden era. A senior South Korean official reportedly saying firms are in a, quote, impossible position, pressed to invest billions in U.S. industry while denied visas to finish projects on time. Chipmaking giant TSMC hit a roadblock 2 years ago when it could not secure visas for some 500 of its engineers for its plant in Arizona due to protests from the state's construction union. The move forced TSMC to delay production of chips in the U.S. to 2027. The world's biggest EV producer, BYD, predicting a major consolidation in China's hyper-competitive auto market. Executive Vice President Stella Li says that from around 130 companies churning out EVs and hybrids currently, as few as 20 may remain financially viable by 2030. BYD warns many automakers won't survive Beijing's crackdown on aggressive price discounts and a decline in prices following a period of rapid growth. While discounting restricted, BYD says companies will now have to compete on technology and driving experience instead of price. It, too, is feeling the squeeze from a check on the price war, with profits and sales forecasts slashed. Citi has sharply lowered BYD's sales outlook, predicting 4.6 million cars this year, down from an earlier estimate of 5.8 million units. Still, the company says it's confident, pointing to expansion overseas. It's already selling in the UK and Europe and plans to start production in Hungary later this year. At the same time, European auto giants are going on the offensive, unveiling new models to counter China's growing presence in their home market. In the run-up to the IAA Mobility Conference in Munich, Germany's top legacy automakers Volkswagen and BMW unveiled their new EVs. France's Renault too launched updates on its popular Clio and a new electric mini supercar. Chinese brands like BYD and XPeng have been gaining ground in Europe thanks to cheaper production, government subsidies, and strong battery supply chains. Analysts say European launches are a direct response to this challenge in a bid to retain market share in the bloc while offsetting declining sales in China. The region's auto sector has faced a multitude of struggles, including rising production costs, US tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and regulatory pressures. Tesla's foray into the Indian market appears to be off to a slow start. Sales since the US electric car maker's mid-July launch reportedly fell short of expectations. The EV maker has been struggling in major markets, including Europe and in China, as well as a backlash against CEO Elon Musk. But other factors are at play in India. Rebecca Bundan filed this report for CNA from Mumbai.
This is the Model Y, finally on sale in India, where Tesla launched in July.
The first day the website opened, I think I made the booking at like 9:30 a.m.
Shaolin Chen is one of the first customers in India to buy the model. The $85,000 EV is on the way from the electric car maker's Shanghai plant. A fan of the brand, the technology, and Elon Musk, Shaolin's wanted to own a Tesla for years.
They've changed the entire world's belief about electric vehicles, and they've literally set the standard for transition of the world from gasoline to electric.
The car maker also got an endorsement from Maharashtra State's Transport Minister, reported locally as the first Indian to receive the Model Y from Tesla's new Mumbai showroom.
Marks the official launch of the...
A second showroom opened a month later in New Delhi. But despite the fanfare and fan base, Tesla sales in India have fallen short of expectations, weighing on a company already struggling with declining revenues in some major markets. Tesla's sales in Europe fell 40% this July, down 7 months straight, according to the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. And it's losing market share in China, its second largest market after the US. Tesla may be hoping that India could make up for some of the shortfall, but the company doesn't seem to have made great inroads so far. Bloomberg reports that the EV maker has sold just over 600 cars in India since its July launch. Analysts say company CEO Elon Musk's controversial politics have alienated consumers. But they don't think India's sluggish sales are closely linked to the brand's image.
In India, it's quite the opposite. They've been waiting for a Tesla. Tesla is a status symbol. It just carrying it as gives enough conversation, let's say mileage.
One problem is Tesla's high price tag, fueled by India's steep import duties on cars, keeping it out of reach for most Indians.
The competition is fierce because of the good Chinese brands entering into the market, which are offering very well feature-loaded vehicles at a price point which is very, very consumer-centric. And that is going to be a challenge for Elon Musk rather than the perception of his image in general.
Another challenge, not enough charging points. And EVs only make up about 5% of India's car sales. Overall, it's this combination of high cost, limited EV infrastructure, and increasing competition that's putting the brakes on Tesla's advance here. Rebecca Bundan, CNA, Mumbai.
On to market action, Hong Kong stocks hitting 4-year highs with gains driven by bets that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates this month, spurring inflows and demand for risk assets in Asia. Some of the heavyweights, Alibaba shares surging 3.35%, banking giant HSBC up 2/3%. But the rally on the mainland took a breather with a tumble in chip-making giant SMIC. Its Shanghai-listed stock ending the day down more than 10%. Shanghai and Shenzhen also lower. Shenzhen worse off by 1.2 in the red. Japan's Nikkei ending lower, dragged by a stronger yen and profit-taking. South Korean shares also rose to more than a 4-year high, buoyed by Wall Street overnight gains, as well as renewed hopes of a domestic policy boost. And gold continues scaling record peaks. Gold futures topping $3,600 an ounce as lower interest rates make bullion more attractive. Hong Kong and Southeast Asian nations should take the opportunity to step up collaboration and advance their economies given today's trade uncertainties. Now, that was the message from Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee and visiting Malaysian Transport Minister Anthony Loke at a forum in Hong Kong. Mr. Lee said the city has much more to offer ASEAN members as a gateway to mainland China. ASEAN is Hong Kong's third largest investment destination, and Mr. Lee says the city is planning to open a trade and economic office in Kuala Lumpur. This will be the fourth in the region, adding to offices in Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand.
As Hong Kong and ASEAN deepen our collaboration, we are paving the way for stronger economic partnerships and enhanced regional connectivity, creating opportunities for shared growth and prosperity. Together, we are not afraid of storms. United, we will sail our ships through thick and thin.
Malaysia is this year's ASEAN chair. Its Transport Minister Anthony Loke suggested that Hong Kong sees the bloc as a massive consumer market of some 700 million and wants to tap on their connectivity to invest in Southeast Asian cities.
Together, by bridging our strengths, Hong Kong and ASEAN can turn today's ambition into tomorrow's reality for our people, for Asia and the world. The bridges we build today, whether physical, digital or human, will carry prosperity for generations. Malaysia stands ready to bridge this partnership, and ASEAN stands ready to embrace Hong Kong as family. Together, we do not just connect markets, we connect dreams. Malaysia and ASEAN look forward to turning this word into action.
And that's your business update. Back to you, Telly.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Well, we are going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, the development of artificial intelligence set to be of top priority as China lays out its plans for the next 5-year blueprint. You're watching East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we've been following. Reports from Nepal say protesters have set fire to the parliament building as violence there shows no sign of easing. The resignation by the Prime Minister and the rollback of a controversial social media law has done little to quell the protests. South Korea's top diplomat Cho Hyun set to meet his U.S. counterpart Marco Rubio. The talks focused on the hundreds of South Koreans detained during a major immigration raid in Georgia state. North Korea conducts a new engine test for long-range ballistic missiles, said to enhance the country's strategic nuclear capability. Senior Chinese officials say developing artificial intelligence is a must for the country. Well, this comes as China seeks to integrate AI use across key sectors by 2030 to boost growth as its tech rivalry with the U.S. intensifies.
我们将一手抓技术供给，促进智能产业化；一手抓赋能应用，加快产业智能化，推动人工智能产业高质量发展，加快高水平赋能新兴工业化。
Officials elaborated on these plans at a news conference in Beijing today. AI is expected to feature strongly in China's next 5-year blueprint, which is being drafted and set to begin next year. They say the country is looking to strengthen its industrial supply through innovation in high-end computing chips and looking to promote the development of intelligent agents like humanoid robots. Well, the issue of jobs was addressed as well.
在推进 人工智能广泛应用的过程中，可能会对部分重复性、危险性的岗位产生替代效应，但同时也将提高劳动效率和安全水平，更能催生大量新岗位、新职业， 促进就业、提质、扩容。
Well, this comes as the government touts progress of the 14th five-year plan and begins formulating the next blueprint that's set to come into effect from 2026. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Louis Liu, Head of Asia Economics at Oxford Economics. Well, thanks, Louis, for joining us on East Asia Tonight this evening. So we heard there, Beijing basically saying that AI will anchor its next blueprint. So help us understand this, though, right? I mean, it's semiconductors, it's advanced chips. It is still pretty reliant on foreign supply. Do you see that choke point narrowing, or is it going to affect China's AI ambitions by 2030?
Well, I think it's good to be on, but I think a lot of that depends on what are the concrete measures that we put into place to, one, increase the self-reliance on domestic chips that are produced, and two, what are these chips going to do to the economic outlook in terms of raising productivity, in terms of ensuring that jobs are being automated and the labor force essentially gets an upgrade. So I think a lot of that is really in the details. If you look at the current environment where China is quite reliant on foreign supply for at least the very high-end semiconductors, that there is a risk that it becomes a bit of a choke point, especially with external risks, geopolitical tensions continuing to be quite heavy in the horizon. So I think there is a risk, but that's going to really incentivize the Chinese government to step up its efforts to really ensure that there is, some kind of a supply chain security around these integral products.
And just stepping back to the bigger picture, what's likely going to be a central feature for its next five-year plan? Because, is it its bid to leapfrog the West? Is that going to be that? Or is it just to secure its own supply chains?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to look a bit more inward. So yes, a lot of these guidance, I would say, and I say guidance because China being a centrally planned economy, this is essentially a policy document, a top-level policy document. And I think that the guidance that we will see will be internally focused in that it will be more on, securing sustainable growth drivers, so pivoting to domestic demand, pivoting to productivity, AI-related productivity, rather than, and using these tools as a combat for, the external risk, the external environment. So I don't think that we can see that as a direct confrontation of the challenging external environment that it is in. But for the Chinese leaders, they're essentially seeing this as killing two birds with one stone. If you can, really secure your domestic demand prospects, really secure your supply chain resiliency, then you can counter some of these challenges that the West is putting on to China.
Yeah, so this current plan now, it's basically a champion of dual circulation, which is trying to boost domestic demand while staying open to the world. But U.S. pressure, as you've mentioned, it is rising. I mean, that balancing act, though, how realistic is it?
Well, I think if they can achieve some level of dual circulation, so a lot of to do with dual circulation is self-reliance, really ensuring that, the Chinese factory is producing for the Chinese consumer, right? To put it very simply, if they can achieve that type of a domestic rebalancing, as we like to call it in China, then I think that could be a very potent force against some of these external headwinds that maybe the West or US specifically imposes on China trade or China supply chains. What we are seeing over the past year when it comes to tariff risk, when it comes to increased technological restrictions on Chinese manufacturers, these are, I think, risks that won't go away over the next 5 years. So it would probably weigh quite heavily as policymakers think about formulating the next plan, the next 5-year plan. Of course, I think that's going to, again, push Chinese governments towards, innovation, self-reliance, how to increase their own productivity. But that's not a function of what's happening from external pressures. That's really a function of a recognition that the domestic growth model is perhaps weakening over the past few decades.
But what's also not going away is the demographic squeeze. We're talking about China's aging population, shrinking workforce, falling birth rates, all of that. How much of that is going to drag into its new plan?
Well, I think that's, again, I think China's demographics is probably on a trend that is perhaps the worst, if not the worst, if not one of the worst in the region. And that's a trend that you can't really reverse with, light touch policies to raise consumption or to, lift the retirement rate. Those type of policies doesn't actually do much to reverse aging population. So demographics is I would say a pressure point that we will have to address in the next 5-year plan. And the easiest way to address it economically is to raise productivity. If you have an aging population, the best way to really counter that and to ensure that the economy has a growth driver is to really raise the productivity of your workers, of your labor force. And doing that via AI, via automation, via digitalization is probably the most intuitive way to go around that. So we should see that feature quite heavily, I would say, in the next 5-year plan, just because it is the key risk for the Chinese economy over the next 10 or 20 years.
Right. And Louis, just before I let you go, obviously the markets also want clarity on some numbers. So share with us, what do you expect, in terms of growth targets, areas of emphasis, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the growth target, we are, obviously 5-year plans with a longer term economic forecast of horizon in mind. China wants to be, an advanced economy a moderately advanced economy by 2035, and we think that to reach that, the economy would have to grow at a pace of about 4.55%. Now, that's quite ambitious, but we think that could feature in the next 5-year plan, a growth rate around that neighborhood. Now, whether or not they meet that growth target, I think is probably up to anybody's guess. But to the extent that they can leverage on some of these productivity gains sooner rather than later, that could make that growth target feasible over the next 5 years. Now, in terms of key themes, we are looking into themes on innovation, on what AI Plus does, not just on a central level, but also in some of the local governments, how they intend to roll that out to different businesses, different government sectors. We're also looking into themes on raising domestic demand, domestic consumption, making the Chinese consumer a more integral part of economic success.
It's been great speaking with you. Really enjoyed that conversation there. I was just talking to Louis Liu, Head of Asia Economics at Oxford Economics. Now, in other news, one of Thailand's most influential and divisive political figures has been sent to jail. The Supreme Court sentenced former Prime Minister Thaksin to a year in prison, ruling that his 6-month hospital stay back in 2023 did not count as time served. CNA's Saksit Sambat has more.
The sentencing against former Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra in the hands of the Supreme Court marks a peak in a series of legal defeats against him and his family, the political clan, and has huge ramifications for Thai politics as a whole. The judges have found that his hospital detention that he served in August 2023 to February 2024 was not done according to procedure, and this is why they have sentenced him to 1 year in prison that he has to serve right now as we speak. Now let's cast our minds back to August 2023 when he came back from a self-imposed exile of 15 years. That's when the police picked him up, brought him to a judge, and sentenced him to 8 years in jail for past offenses, including corruption and abuse of power. But instead of serving that first night in jail, he was sent to a medical facility because of past ailments. The word was that he was critically ill. Now, the judges are of the opinion that there are many inconsistencies and many irregularities in those 6 months. So many protocols, many follow-ups have not been followed through. Documents that have been requested have not been served. The questions have been raised about the medical equipment that he used. They exist in any other hospital, so why did he spend those 6 months in the VIP wing of a downtown Bangkok hospital whatsoever? So this is why the judges have reached a conclusion to send him back to jail for 1 year. Thaksin has received a royal pardon that has reduced his sentence to 1 year, and that 1 year he is going to serve now. His daughter, the also former Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, she has come out to the press. She has bemoaned and decried the verdict. She said that her father is the first Thai Prime Minister in history who is actually going into jail, despite the good things, in her words, that she has done for the benefit of the country when he served as Prime Minister 20 years ago. But she has also showed her appreciation that Thaksin's prison sentence was reduced to 1 year to begin with. Now, this has, of course, also huge ramifications to Thai politics as well. He is a very influential man. He has always been a very influential man over these past decades. But as we mentioned before, he has suffered a series of defeats at the courts that has removed his daughter from office. Then his Pro-Thai party has lost his grip to power, and now he is actually losing his freedom. Thaksin came here in his luxury limousine to the court. He has showed his face to the public, but he's now leaving the court in a prison van. Saksit Sombat, CNA Bangkok.
Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, a decades-long standoff between Google and South Korea coming to an end after the U.S. tech giant agrees to blur satellite images on its mapping services. Plus, a life of travel, freedom, and no 9-to-5. Meet the minimalist nomad who retired in her 40s and find out how she did that. Google says that it will comply with the South Korean government's demand to blur sensitive satellite images on its mapping services, paving the way for the American tech giant to expand its navigation services in the country. Well, this announcement may conclude a nearly two-decade dispute in which the tech giant has argued for access to detailed maps, but which Seoul refused to provide, citing national security reasons. Google says that it would invest a lot of time and resources to remove coordinates of security facilities from its maps. Google Maps access was raised during South Korea's recent trade talks with the U.S. South Korea is one of the few places in the world where Google Maps does not fully function. Tourists have few mapping apps in English when traveling in Korea, sometimes resorting to local maps from Nave and Kakao, which may not be fully functional in English. America's Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, has begun to withdraw its recognition of 7 testing labs that are either owned or controlled by the Chinese government. The commission cited national security concerns for the move. The affected labs test electronic devices such as smartphones, cameras, and computers that are for use within the U.S. All electronics are required to undergo authorization before they can be imported, with some 75% of such items tested by labs within China. Separately, the FCC said that the recognition for 4 Chinese labs that expired since May will not be renewed. Commenting on the development, Commission Chairperson Brendan Carr said that foreign adversary governments should not control testing labs for devices that it certifies as safe for the U.S. market. The FCC previously suggested that many of the labs that have tested thousands of U.S.-bound devices have ties to the Communist Party of China, as well as Chinese state-owned enterprises or even the military. In 2022, it banned sales of new equipment from Huawei and ZTE, also citing national security risk. Fanny Lin has been globetrotting since she retired early in her 40s. Now, her secret to financial independence? A radical choice she made when she was in her 20s. But just how doable is that? CNA's Money Mind delves into her plans.
Fanny's been globetrotting ever since she retired at age 43. Now 57 years old, she credits her lifestyle to a retirement plan she put into action when she was just 29.
我要告诉大家，我没有富爸爸，而且我是一个低学历、低直接、低薪资，然后长不高又不漂亮，好的一个完全没有优势的一个身份。可是我还是能做到。你知道这中间诀窍是什么吗？就是因为我29岁就意识到我没有这些条件，你只能一步一脚印的去累积自己的财力或实力，对。然后呢， 靠着纪律去完成我的目标。
Fanny made 2 key decisions at 29. She began saving as much as she could, and she decided on the lifestyle she wanted, a minimalist international nomad. Now, everything Fanny needs fits in this one bag.
这包是我的衣服，3套衣服，然后外套、袜子，然后电脑、电器用品跟电脑有相关的，然后这出门的随身碟，然后盥洗用品、保养品，我的东西就这样。
4 years ago, she gave up renting an apartment to live in one hostel after another.
刚开始讲出来的时候，大家都吓死，说居无定所，那你就是住在这个天桥下吗？流浪汉吗？对。
Fanny does not own any property, but she is not homeless, and that's a result of careful retirement calculations.
刚开始工作可能就是3万块，慢慢加薪这样。好，那以一个3万块来说，如果你要同时用存买房的钱，又要存退休金，是非常困难的。那我就在想，这2件事哪一件事是比较重要的？我就面临抉择。今天你买了房，好，有了房子很好，你安居乐业。问题是说，有没有可能你买了房没有现金，老了之后没有退休金，要等社工来送便当吗？好，可是如果我去存退休金的话，我有了钱，我可以住任何地方。
So instead of saving for a property of her own, this is how Fanny started saving for retirement.
所以我大概平均10年是存心50%。那这样子存就是把它这个存下来的钱呢，我就是去投资共同基金，然后还有就是保单的部分。所以这2个加起来呢，我每年是领60万。你知道存钱其实会上瘾的哦。
It took Fanny just 14 years to reach her goal. By age 43, she had a portfolio worth around 10 million new Taiwan dollars. This was enough to generate the 600,000 new Taiwan dollars a year she budgeted to live her FIRE lifestyle, financial independence, retire early.
只要讲到提早退休，大家都会幻想说，我今天买了这个，用这个理财工具投资下去，明天就会赚大钱，变成富翁，然后我就可以躺平，就可以退休了哈。那其实不是这样的，理财其实是长远之计。
Well, if you want to find out more, you can catch the complete Money Mind segment, How I Retired Early, on YouTube, Me Watch, and our website, cna.asia. And that rounds up this edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.